Hi everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski are taking a look at one of the stakes races on the first Saturday of the Saratoga meet this summer. Race 9 at Saratoga is the Grade 3 Kelso Stakes, going 1 mile on the inner turf course for older horses. This race used to be called the Forbidden Apple, but it was renamed the Kelso, and the race that was the Kelso was renamed something else. I'm not going to get into that, I'll confuse myself. But Craig, for the Kelso on Saturday, we have a field of 8 runners signed on for the turf, plus 1 MTO, and a couple of former Grade 1 winners in this field that I did peg as the 2 morning line favorites, Annapolis and Casa.
Yeah, it just kind of shows the strength of the Saratoga meet that we open up with a Grade 3 and you draw 2 in-form Grade 1 winners. It's not like they're dropping, off a bad form. They both come in and look strong, and I totally agree with your morning line.
Yeah, they look pretty formidable in here, but there are some other runners that have been in good form recently, like Big Everest, Philo, Anaconda, so a lot of depth to this Grade 3 event. Before we get into the main contenders, let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector for this Kelso. And Craig, there is quite a bit of speed signed on in this race for only an 8-horse field. 3 runners feel like they basically have to go forward. Big Everest and Philo, they have shown that they are best when they control on the lead, and Midday Image is stretching out from sprint races.
It's definitely a race that I think is going to have some pace. We'll talk about who that's going to benefit. We can see the late pace flag on the number 8 Casa, but I don't disagree at all with the pace projector. Even Philo, who had shown a propensity not to particularly run well outside of Canada, or when he came to the United States, showed that maybe he's over that hurdle with his big race on the front end last time.
Yeah, those 3 will have to sort themselves out towards the front end. We'll see if that fast pace does develop, but it does feel like there's plenty of speed in this race. Let's go through this field in post-position order, beginning with the number 1 English B, and we'll take a look at his past performances in Timeform US. And, Craig, this is a horse that looks a little overmatched at first glance, just based on the results of his recent races. He was beaten by Annapolis 2 back and is coming off an off-the-board finish in an optional claiming race at Churchill Downs last time. But when you just look at his speed figures, he's not too far below some of the favorites in this race, and he arguably has been a little bit against dynamics a couple of times, particularly in that last race.
I would make the same argument. He kind of was stuck up on the lead in between horses, a place where he doesn't really do his best running. He's a horse who's won graded stakes in the past. I believe he won the Virginia Derby as a 3-year-old quite a while ago, but he's basically held his form, and I think he's definitely one you need to consider in here, DP, in that we suspect the pace is going to be fast. He draws a good inside post, so you would think that Johnny Velasquez can work out a good trip for him from in there, and he definitely has some ability. His speed figures aren't far off the 2 favorites we're going to talk about.
Yeah, he'd perhaps be a little bit of a surprise as a win candidate, but he's gotten a piece of some races like this at big prices in the past. The number 2 is Annapolis, and let's go all the way back to his Grade 1 win in the Turf Mile last October at Keeneland. This was his prep for the Breeders' Cup Mile, where he was unsuccessful, but went off at a pretty short price in that Breeders' Cup, going off at 5-1 that day, and you could see why when you watch this replay. He got a good trip, but splits horses and is able to decisively defeat a pretty good field that included the horse that is his main rival today, Casa.
He ran big this day, and I think he also ran well in the Breeders' Cup. He was just up against it. It's easy to forget this late in the season that he was just a 3-year-old. He took a lot of action at the windows, drew a really tough post, and it's not like he was embarrassed that day. He came back this year in top form, overcoming what was a slow pace to get up and run down Churchtown and get the win. Had a nice speed figure doing it, so he's a contender for sure. And here, I expect him to run well.
He probably had to work a little harder than some expected when they bet him down to 4-5 last time. But as you said, you see those blue color coded pace figures in Timeform US. So he was having to close into a pace that pretty much held together. Churchtown was stalking the pace in that spot. Up next is the long shot in the field, the number 3 Midday Image. And this horse, Craig, probably going to show speed, just given the fact that he's been attending paces in much shorter races in recent starts. And the times that he had gone 2 turns prior to that, he had shown shown a lot of front running speed, running off on the lead. He just feels like one that might not be up to this test facing a field of this quality.
I can see him as a pace factor, but not really as a win contender. His speed figures are a little bit light. He's a 7-year-old. It's not like I expect some big jump up from him. He's stepping way up in class, but he can have an impact on the race if he tries to gun to the front end.
Another long shot is drawn to his outside, the number 4, Ice Chocolat, coming in for Mark Cassie, and another horse who was stretching out in distance from a series of sprint races. He did try 2 turns a couple of times at Woodbine back in the summer of 2022, narrowly lost both of those races. But Craig, he would have to improve even on his recent sprint speed figures if he were to be a factor here.
He'd have to improve quite a bit. I expect this race to go in the mid 120s for the winner, whoever that turns out to be. And as you can see, he's only run his highest speed figure came on synthetic with a 119. His turf figures leave a little to be desired. And it's just that they came in sprints, and there is that question mark of stretching out.
The number 5 is Big Everest, and he is coming in on quite a win streak. He's won 4 in a row, 6 of his last 7 races, including his last start, this cliffhanger stakes at Monmouth, where, Craig, I know we did a stakes preview for that race, and I think we're still trying to figure out how he went off at 3-1 that day, looking like the lone speed on paper like he usually is. And Big Everest got his preferred front-running trip that day without much pressure, was able to hold off a slightly weaker field in this one. This horse clearly loves to win races, but as you can see from his past performances, he's got some blue color-coded pace figures splashed across there, generally has gotten good trips when he's been successful, and just feels like he has a much more taxing pace scenario to deal with this time.
It does feel like that. And when you see these PPs, the one time he wasn't able to make the lead, he didn't get the job done here at Saratoga, the same track he's trying today. He does face some more formidable foes for the front end. I'm not sure how much money he's going to take. I suspect he'll probably slip under the radar a little bit, but unlike last time, I'm not sure that would be an overlay.
To his outside is another runner who looks to go forward in the early stages, the number 6, Philo de Ariana. And we'll take a look at his last race in the poker, which also includes Anaconda, who we'll get to in just a bit. They're both riding the rail into the stretch this day. You can see Philo de Ariana leading the field. Anaconda, you'll see in behind, having some trouble finding a clear path in the stretch of this race. Philo de Ariana, Craig, he's a horse who had most of his success prior to this up in Canada, as you noted earlier in this preview, had really been a Woodbine specialist, was able to translate that form to Belmont last time in that 1 turn mile on the Widener turf course there. But the interesting thing for this horse is, having competed mostly at Woodbine and at Belmont, this will be his first try around 2 turns in North America.
It is, and you wonder what the tactics are going to be. He does draw outside of some of the other speed in here, so maybe he'd be content to rate. But when you look at his PPs, there's not really any signs that show that's where he's going to run his best race. The one time he did make up a little ground was on the synthetic in a 5.5 furlong race. It seems like he's probably just a little bit too quick and should be on the front end. And as we've discussed, I'm not really sure that's the place to be, as things could get a little hot.
The number 7, Anaconda, finished about a half length behind Philo de Ariana in that poker last time out, but I thought he ran just as well as that rival, if not a little better, Craig, because he broke slowly that day, got a little rank on the backstretch, rushing up towards the inside, and then you could just see in the replay we just watched, Tyler Gaffalione had some trouble finding a clear path for this horse, tried to go between, wasn't really room there, dove back down to the inside late to try to come inside of that pace setter, but that's never really the best move for a horse that's trying to make up ground, to alter course in the stretch like that. He's just been on an upward trajectory recently. I liked his race 2 back in the Elusive Quality, was barely beaten by Big Everest 3 back, but Big Everest got to hit things his own way on the front end in that dangerous hour. He's going to have to step it up from a speed figure standpoint, but I do like the trajectory this horse is on.
I wouldn't argue with anyone that would expect this horse could run a better race. He ran the best speed figure in the PPs we're looking at a 118 last time. And as you noted, he did it with some trouble, not only at the start, but he kind of got stuffed when his rider moved to the inside. Maybe a cleaner trip, and he can definitely break through to another top.
And then on the outside, we have the number 8, Casa Creed. Let's take a look at his last race in the Grade 1 Jaipur. He was going for his 3rd consecutive victory in this race, having won it in 2021 and 2022. Fell just a little short. Nobody was beating Caravel on the day, and he got outclosed for 2nd by Big Invasion in the late stages. But I still thought the Casa Creed ran pretty well, Craig, considering that he never saw the rail in this race. He was chasing outside the entire way. That's a tough trip to pole in a large field like this. And he does have a reputation as being more of a sprinter, but let's not forget, he won the 4-star Dave last summer going a mile over this course.
I've been one that thinks he's just as good as a mile as he is sprinting. It's just circumstances have led to him winning a little more sprinting. But as you said, he showed in the 4-star Dave, the mile is no problem whatsoever for him. I think he's going to get plenty of pace in here, as we've discussed. And I agree. I think that trip was pretty tough last time, given that outside post. They didn't get to save any ground. It's one of those races where I wish we had track his stats, because I'm sure he lost quite a bit. And for me personally, I think he's the horse to beat.
And the number 9 Gunnet is an MTO in this race. He would be pretty tough if this field came off the turf in that unlikely scenario. Let's throw up our picks for this race, Craig. And I have no argument with the direction that you're going in. I kind of agree with you. Casa Creed has always been a little underrated going a mile. His form has been solid this year, even though he hasn't won yet. And he's supposed to get the right kind of pace setup.
Yeah, I mean, that was his first race in a while as well. I expect them to improve a little bit from that one. I like the stretch out for him, and I like the pace setup. So expecting a big race from Casa Creed.
Yep, I agree with that. I just put the number 7 Anaconda on top. I think he's going to be a better price. He's another one that could benefit from that fast pace that's predicted. And I just think he's been subtly improving in each of his recent starts and could still fly under the radar in this race. So the number 7 Anaconda for me, the number 8 for Casa Creed for Craig in the Grade 3 Kelso Stakes on Saturday at Saratoga. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.